When I was 10, my parents split up because my mom found out my dad had gotten his mistress pregnant when she showed up to our house during my birthday party. My dad denied the baby was his, but the mistress had some damning evidence of an affair, which she showed my mom in front of me. It was a traumatic experience, and I couldn't celebrate my birthday for a long time. My parents eventually got back together when I was 13, and I have never heard about the baby again. They've recently retired and downsized. My husband bought my childhood home from them, which is where we currently live. Last week, my dad's former mistress showed up to my house with a girl. I wasn't home, so my husband let them in to wait, as they kept insisting the girl was my sister and they had something urgent to tell me. I asked them to leave as soon as I saw her, but she kept insisting she had to talk to me. She claimed my dad never gave her child support and that he abandoned his daughter because of me. They'd been struggling for a long time, and now with the virus, they'd lost their home. She'd come to ask my dad for help. She hadn't realized he had moved. She kept insisting I help her and that my sister had lost out on a dad all these years and the least I could do was let them stay for a few days. When I told her no, she started begging me to give her my dad's new address, but I refused. She tried to physically take my phone for me to get the information. My husband intervened and told her to leave or he would call the police. They left. They've since come to my house twice again and have been harassing me over Facebook. I've tried blocking them, but they keep making new accounts. My husband is insisting I let him send them a cease and desist letter so that I can get a restraining order if their behavior continues. I'm hesitant because the girl sent me a really long letter over Facebook yesterday claiming she just wanted to get a chance to get to know her dad and sister. She apologized for the way her mom was handling things and claimed she was only behaving this way because she was so desperate. She asked me for my dad's number again. If she is my sister, she has a right to know my dad, and I don't want to prematurely burn any bridges. However, my dad and mom are in a good place right now, and I don't want to ruin that. They've had a very happy marriage these past 15 years, and I know if my dad lets his other daughter in, it'll destroy that. I know my reasoning is selfish, but I feel like if he had wanted to know her, he would have contacted her himself. What should I do? Do I help them? I think OP's dad needs to make this decision, not OP or her husband. I'd take the daughter's info, pass it on to father privately, if OP is concerned about upsetting her mother, and let him deal with it. Story 2. My boyfriend and I celebrated our second-year anniversary last month. As the title suggests, I am crazy jealous of his ex and I don't know what to do. Here's some backstory. He got a woman pregnant when he and she were very young. He manned up, proposed to the woman, but the relationship failed or something, so they never got married. He has been very present in his son's life, who is now a teenager. 2 years ago, I met my boyfriend at the bar. That first night we hung out, I asked him about a wicked bruise on his arm, and he said that he had been having sex with the mother of his child and fell off the bed when he climaxed. That's how he referred to her, the mother of my child. I remember feeling kind of weird about that. I pressed the issue a bit, and he said that they aren't together, but they sleep together when they are both single. At the time, I thought, whatever. So, a few weeks later, we started dating, and it was really wonderful. We only really spend time weekday evenings, because weekends he spends at his son's house, who lives about 45 minutes to an hour away. He doesn't spend the night, usually. He just goes in the morning and then comes home late in the evenings and goes to bed. Eventually, he proposed to me, and I said yes, and we moved to another city together. At this point, I thought we were going to start a new life together. Oh, no, dead wrong. He still spends the weekends with his son, who now lives 2 hours away. No problems from my standpoint, except 2 things. First, I've never met his son. We have talked about it a few times, but each time it's been brought up follows with not now, or maybe next month, etc., etc. This became a huge sore point for me. He is very sensitive about protecting his son from drama because he had a bad time as a kid. So, his teenage son doesn't know about me. My boyfriend says he doesn't tell his son about his relationships. Okay, fine, I understand that. He says he talks to his son about his relationship to his ex, the mother, and that the son knows they aren't together, aren't going to be together, etc. They broke up shortly after their son was born. Then I found out that his ex doesn't know about me either. He said he doesn't talk to her about relationships either. He said he doesn't know about her relationships and she doesn't know about him. I'm kind of skeptical about this because he told me the very first night that he was still off and on sleeping with his ex when they were both single. So obviously they talk about relationships a little bit, right? Then my boyfriend told me he asked her what she would think if he got married to someone else. And he told me she said she would be all right with that. He said he felt relieved because he was really worried that she would be upset if he married someone else. At the time, my feelings were definitely hurt to hear that. First off, I am still a big secret to her and his son. He doesn't want them to know about me. Second, why does he have to ask her permission to marry someone else? Why does he have to soften the ground up, so to speak, before springing the news on her that he's met someone else? I know it's so important to protect the child in this situation, but I can't help but feel like something isn't right. Why is he keeping me a secret? On a side note, I have met his mother, but only once, and I've never met his father. His mother and his ex are best friends. They spend lots of time together. He and his father have issues on the other hand. He doesn't tell me about his issues with his father when they come up. But he does talk to his ex about it because she knows him, he says. Feelings hurt again. I find myself being very jealous about lots of things he does with his ex and their son. Consequently, he goes to their house and barbecues with them, and spends all the holidays with them, obviously. 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Easter, my boyfriend's birthday, and every weekend, of course. My boyfriend also sometimes spends the night over at his son's house, like for Christmas, or sometimes just for fun. He also gets called on to do things for the ex around the house, like help move furniture, fix things, mow the lawn, etc., which make me really jealous too. About a year into our relationship, my boyfriend's grandmother passed away, and he was very upset about it, and I tried to help out any way I could. But my feelings were once again hurt when he went to the funeral with his ex and their son, and I wasn't invited. God, that sounds so terrible to complain out loud, I know, but my feelings really were hurt. Once again, I understand this is to protect the son, but still it stung. He has pictures up around the house of him and the ex and the son as a family. I understand they are just pictures and that they are important to him and his son to give up, but I'm so sensitive about the issue that I can't stand to look at them. I practically burst into tears. It's just so obvious in day-to-day life that this woman is the most important woman to my boyfriend, and because she is the mother of his child, she is by default much more important to him than I am. I don't want to feel jealous about her. I can't help but think that my insecurity about her has to do with the fact that the first night we hung out, I heard about him sleeping with her off and on. That really left an impression on me, and I think that's partly why I'm so insecure about her. When I moved out, we were having a really hard time. He basically told me that he didn't want to marry me anymore. God, it killed me to hear that. It was one of those situations where the home life was terrible and filled with fighting in the evenings. And then on the weekends, he would go over to their house and stay really, really late, probably just to get away from me and the drama. But the more free time he spent over there, the more my feelings were hurt, because it seemed like he was happier over there at her house and didn't want to try to work things out with me. Since moving out, things have definitely smoothed out between us in day-to-day stuff, though the greater questions about our future are in the air. This is still a thorn in my side, but I haven't brought it up. We are taking things more slowly, so any help for me? I've never been in this position before, and I'm not sure how to deal with my emotions. How do I stop being jealous of this woman and the history she has with him? Should I press the button to meet his son? I feel like that's really his decision and I have no place to ask to meet him. But it really feels like he and his ex are playing house and I am the mistress here. Any ideas on how to get over this? Thanks. Jealousy of the ex really isn't the problem here. Opus feels like a mistress because she is. Story 3. There's no good reason that his son and his ex don't know about Opus, especially as marriage was on the table. Also, if he only slept with his ex while he was single, wouldn't not sleeping with her be a sign that he was in a relationship? So wouldn't she know? Unless he never stopped occasionally sleeping with her. He's using hurting his son as an excuse to keep OP from his life. What's the explanation for OP's lack of relationship with his parents? How does that relate to hurting his son? OP doesn't have to get over this. How OP is being treated is appalling. OP should have met his son a long time ago. I would pretty much never say this, but it's ultimatum time. I would be prepared to walk away from what OP has said. It doesn't sound like he'll open up his life to OP. There's a lot of background, but I'll, 21 female, try to cut this down the best I can. A few years ago, it was revealed that my dad, 43, was cheating on my mom, 42, for the third time. His philosophy is, it's not cheating because we didn't have sex, and she filed for divorce. The divorce was quite hostile due to his mistress pulling strings in the background. And he treated my mom and I like crap over the span of nearly 2 years. With my mom, he acted like your standard but hurt spouse who's pissed they're getting divorced due to their actions. I watched him throw fits at my mom for not getting his way. Watched him try to literally take the router out of the house when online classes were still new and being worked out, and would get pissed I didn't take his side, etc. This boiled over when he sent me a text message practically disowning me, but then coming back 2 weeks later acting like we're buddies. My relationship with him was already on thin ice at that point due to his behavior. So at that point, I just said, screw this, I'm done, and decided when my mom was finally out of there, I was cutting contact. He ended up marrying his mistress, who no one has really met, a month ago. Here's where things get tricky. My great-grandmother, his grandma, passed away due to cancer. Her daughter, who took care of her, had told the family that she wanted a celebration of life party as opposed to a funeral. She was the life of the party and everyone loved her. She definitely wasn't the type to want the final party in her honor to be one sitting in a funeral home. My mom and I were invited and asked to join, and we were fully planning to, until my dad decided he wanted to bring his mistress to the party. I was pissed. I find it extremely inappropriate that he wants to bring his new spouse to the event to introduce her to everyone, and her being the one who tore our family apart no less. Note, my great-grandmother said very explicitly she wanted her nowhere near her family, and that him bringing his mistress to introduce would completely deter what the party was actually meant for. I said to him it's extremely disrespectful to bring the mistress to an event knowing his grandmother's feelings for her. He said he wanted someone who would support him there, and that we don't get a say on who he brings and is upset I'm not supporting it. Now, my mom and I are on the fence of if we should go. We want to be there for my aunt and her family, and we would tolerate it if only he was coming. But I refuse to be anywhere near her acting like she's my new stepmom. And I know my mom won't have anything nice to say if they're dumb enough to try and approach her, which they are. Would we be in a hole if we don't go to the memorial party? My dad, a few other family members, and friends think we would be, because the event is for my great-grandmother, and it's just a few hours of our life, so we can ignore them. Not the whole, but OP should talk about it with her aunt first. This is supposed to be a celebration of OP's great-grandmother's life, and OP's dad is expressly going against her wishes by bringing his new wife to the party. Story 4. My sister recently found out her husband has been having an affair for 2 years and the mistress is pregnant. This is especially devastating for her as they've been trying to have children for the last 4 years and we're finally talking about starting IVF. My brother-in-law's been begging my sister for a second chance and swears he's broken it off with the other woman. She's currently staying at my place and hasn't decided what to do next. My sister did some digging and figured out who she was, and when she showed me a picture, I was shocked. The woman rents an apartment I own. My brother-in-law would sometimes do the maintenance for it. She definitely knows he's married. As the first time he did work there, I mentioned he was my sister's husband. I'm so angry on my sister's behalf, and I told my husband I wanted her to move out. He politely asked her to move out by the end of the month. She got angry and said this was her home, and if we wanted her out, we would have to evict her. My husband is on the fence about going through with it, but I definitely want to evict her. I know she's pregnant, but I'm just so disgusted by what she's done, and I don't want someone like that living in my property. I also think it would be better to evict her before the baby is born, because that might make it more difficult to get her out, and it wouldn't technically be an eviction, per se, but the outcome is the same. Edit 2. I do not live in the US. Technically, we're asking her to vacate the property, not actually evicting, which we can do without a reason. It's also mentioned in her contract. If she refuses to move out by the notice period, 2+ months, then we would take her to court and get a proper eviction. I'm obviously not going in front of a judge and say I want her out because she's pregnant. Edit 3. I will add this here because some variation of it keeps getting asked. Did she definitely know your brother-in-law was married? Yes, my sister has text evidence of her asking why he won't leave his wife multiple times, and he replies that he loves her every time. How far along is she? I don't know the exact number of weeks, but she's very early in her pregnancy, so it would be more of a whole move for me to wait. By the time she's ended her tenancy, she will have a 4 or 5 month old. Why aren't you mad at punishing your brother-in-law? My sister is going to divorce him and take half of their assets, including forcing him to sell the property they own, so if that's not punishment enough, how was she as a tenant? She's paying you rent, so you shouldn't kick her out. As a tenant, she was fine. Until I realized I was paying the maintenance guy more money, brother-in-law, due to his extra services for her. He was paid hourly. Also, she's paying reduced rent, so yes, I am doing her a favor. If you knowingly duck your landlord's married brother-in-law, you get what you get. She made her own bed, and OP is making sure she has time to find a new place before the baby is born. That's not a whole move. Plus, she noted that the tenant in question was costing her extra by making false maintenance claims so she could duck brother-in-law. So, that alone is grounds for eviction. Brother-in-law. So, that alone is grounds for eviction. Update 2. Sorry, a lot has been going on. 1. I wanted to explain the vendor situation. So the vendors are basically a single hotel with a spacious community hall. We had a down payment placed which was quite sizable, but a small portion was still left to be paid. The agreement was word of mouth, as this is a privately owned business from someone within the community. The reason why we could not cancel is that they book single events a day, and not multiple, and if we canceled, it would be a major revenue loss for them for the day, from what I understood. 2. A lot of you are being abusive towards my parents. They are equally ambushed in this entire situation. Yes, they could have been firm and not persuaded me a bit, but they did what they thought was best in the situation. So many of you are so blissfully unaware of social cues and cultures beyond a very westernized or Eurocentric culture. Sometimes small migratory communities exist where rules of the community often take precedence. All of you are asking me to grow a backbone. Thanks, I guess. Now, onto the relevant bit. Isha, an entitled friend, and her husband have left for a honeymoon in Paris. Yes, in the middle of the pandemic. The honeymoon is being paid for by the money she collected from her parents in the name of paying us back. Her parents and mine met again yesterday after all this unraveled within the far extended community, and they were ashamed to get in touch with us as soon as possible. Her parents were duped by their own child into paying a large amount of money, which she decided to use to take a vacation, as otherwise her partner and she could not afford to be paying for it themselves. Her family is apologetic, but we have made it clear that we would like to see the money returned, even if in small installments by next year, when my partner and I have decided to tie the knot. We will also no longer remain in touch with the family, and they agree it might be for the best. Isha's in-laws have also heard of it and have also cut off Isha and her family till we are paid in full. We will go ahead and get legally married, but we'll wait for a civil marriage till we move in together. Isha is currently in deep water with her family, who have decided to cut her off and cancel all access to them financially. Her family is rather well off, but she herself is not the most stable. However, in most South Asian cultures, kids tend to live with their families for a majority of their lives, if not all their lives. Isha's mother has also since apologized for how she acted about the outfit change. Isha had instructed her to ask me to go change, as she was not happy about my presence, as she felt I would be taking the limelight away from her with my, in her words, hobbling fiancé, and I becoming the center of attention, as people would flock to sympathize with us or congratulate us instead of focusing on her. Like, damn, at least she could have waited till I had some of the amazing wedding food. The reason they have so much power over us is that our families have been friends for generations. Isha's grandfather helped pay my grandfather's housing while our family was nearly rendered homeless, and they also took my father in when times were tough, so as to ensure he got the best of care and his education and schooling were not hampered, as is also very common in South Asian communities. Loved ones often gather in financial support during major life events. They stepped in and helped pay for my mother's medical expenses when I was born due to the absolute trauma my birth was on her and the medical nightmare it turned into. There were so many other instances of her family swooping in to help us, including this year when I lost a grandparent, and they supported us through the sheer emotional drain it was on us. We cannot just brush past these instances and jump to cutting people off. Till now, while I will always be grateful for Grandpa and Grandma on Isha's end, I cannot extend the same for her. I felt like in a hole. I really did at the time I started writing this. I was emotionally exhausted. I had everyone around me scold me for a very public outburst. South Asians and emotions don't go hand in hand unless in our beloved over-the-top movies. Isha was also nearly fired, which added to the hate I was getting from those around me. Isha also apparently cried during the ceremony when she heard about it, and the tears of a bride always pull at heartstrings. I was being told I could have done the decent thing and agreed to be a bridesmaid, as I am her closest friend. I was being told I should not have had a very public breakdown. I was told that my family could have been gracious in giving them the wedding, and then sorted it amongst ourselves later in private rather than creating an unsightly scene. My sister and her husband were together for 5 years before they got married in 2016. Within a month of their marriage, my sister found out she was expecting and told very few people around her. Her mother-in-law was not one of them. When she was 12 weeks along, she finally felt secure enough to announce her pregnancy to everyone else. Entitled mother-in-law started crying and everyone around her was celebrating. My sister announced it during a family lunch between our families. The only ones who knew were me, my parents, and her husband, my brother-in-law. My sister's in-laws and brother-in-law's siblings were just finding out. My sister had not wanted to share the news because she was worried about miscarrying. However, when her mother-in-law saw my parents and me smiling and not being surprised, she started bawling, screaming that my sister ruined her experience of finding out about her grandbaby by not telling her as soon as she found out. She was angry about the fact that my sister shared the news with us. Her literal flesh and blood over her father-in-law had to remove her from the situation, and my sister felt guilty, as did my brother-in-law. They spent the rest of the afternoon trying to make up for it while the rest of us were confused why mother-in-law thought she deserved to know first. This led to another situation. Now, since mother-in-law felt excluded, she made sure she was included from that point onwards, throwing a baby shower much before my sister wanted to. Decor and arrangements, guest list and invites being done without as much as consultation from my sister, inviting mostly mother-in-law's side of the family and not ours, forcing my sister to let her be present for each prenatal checkup and scan, moving into the house with my sister and brother-in-law to help take care of her baby, trying to control what and how much my sister eats, including throwing out essential medication prescribed to her and arguing against my sister's nutritionist, who had made a very extensive meal plan for her. Finally, my brother-in-law and sister had enough. They asked her to move out and not stick her nose into everything that was not her concern. Now mind you, my brother-in-law is a big softy and a mama's boy, but he will stand up for his wife. This led to the penultimate situation. Mother-in-law lost her crap. How could her baby boy throw her out of the house? She decided it must be because my sister is a manipulative bee. Somehow this string of thought landed her to presume that that baby could not be my brother-in-law's because brother-in-law wanted to wait until marriage to have S, and that my sister got pregnant too soon, so mother-in-law went around spreading gossip and rumor everywhere and to anyone stupid enough to listen to her. She went from calling my sister's unborn baby her baby to now calling it every name possible, devil child, the result of cheating, and whatnot. She then started demanding she needed to see proof of paternity. Otherwise she would cut the child and my sister off from the family and also never speak to her son again if he would not condemn his wife's behavior. She was also convinced my family knew of her pregnancy before her because we must have known she cheated and deceptively got her married to brother-in-law to hide the fact. They again had enough, and this went on till she gave birth. Sis and brother-in-law went low contact with mother-in-law for months, pre- and postpartum. Around the time the baby was 5 months old, mother-in-law apologized and stated she wanted access to her baby again. Sis and brother-in-law were very skeptical, but they agreed for supervised visits, only and only if mother-in-law was constantly accompanied by either sister or brother-in-law. Mother-in-law did not like this. She once again threw a tantrum over how her son was corrupted by his evil wife and her darling son would never do something like this to his mother. She again brought up paternity and called brother-in-law blind and an idiot for letting some common hussy force him to parent someone else's child. Brother-in-law calmly stated it was either his way or the highway. Mother-in-law chose his way. This is the peak of the entitled saga. Mother-in-law tries kidnapping the baby. So one of the days when mother-in-law was allowed to visit the baby, she absolutely had no help and demanded to be catered to. Sis was very tired. The baby had colic that week and she was run to the ground. Brother-in-law could not be home and sis tried rescheduling. But mother-in-law was already on the way and it was nearly impossible to stop her. My sister says she had just handed the baby over to mother-in-law in the living room and sat on the couch. Big mistake. She has no idea when she dozed off, but sis must have dozed off for a little while after being up with a fussy child and being exhausted and dealing with postpartum issues. When she came to, neither mother-in-law nor the baby was to be found. She looked for the baby frantically and called her mother-in-law, but no answer. She got in touch with brother-in-law, who drove home, picked her up, and they went to mother-in-law's house to look for her. Father-in-law answered and said he had not seen my mother-in-law since she drove down to visit my sister, but her phone was on to find my phone and they could track her phone from his device as they shared the same cloud. Sure enough, within minutes they see the phone moving towards a local hospital lab area. It is a one-way road and a dead end. They hop in a car and drive to the hospital. Sis finds mother-in-law arguing with the hospital staff for not performing any medical procedures and tests on the baby without the parents. Mother-in-law wanted to get a paternity test performed on the baby. She was detained by the hospital security, and the baby was in the custody of the hospital, who thought she had kidnapped the baby. Sis and brother-in-law reached just in time for the hospital to be calling the cop and trying to locate them. They had to show 10 different types of proof of identity and parentage to the staff before they were allowed to take the baby again. Brother-in-law threatened legal action against mother-in-law. Not sure what came of that. This happened years ago. And mother-in-law and brother-in-law and my sis have the most strained relationship. Baby barely knows their grandmother, but is quite close to grandpa, who often visits. Edit. I just wanted to add that many of you are debating whether she has borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. I am not sure she is diagnosed, and even suggesting that would be poking a wasp's nest. For those of you who have faced similar people, my sister says, find someone who will be your rock through it. Define boundaries and stick to them. Do not give in and always stay skeptical and vigilant around them. And she also said, I am glad the nightmare of a mother-in-law I had in me running to the hospital in mismatched shoes with spit-up covered hair and clothes was an entertaining read for so many people. They should have let the hospital call the cops, because they were right. She 110% did kidnap the baby, and she will almost certainly pull that kind of stuff again. They really should go no contact for the baby's safety. Update 3. So, this post became a source of gossip within my family as we all started sharing stories about mother-in-law and her entitlement. Some of those stories made their way to my father-in-law. Turns out, father-in-law did not know half the things that were going on and often heard altered versions of stories from her. He filed for separation. I don't know exactly what their arrangements are going to be yet, but I do know that he wants nothing to do with that old bag anymore. He is temporarily moving in with my sister and brother-in-law till they figure out finances. And separation details.